Hello, and in today's video we're going to be looking at Conquest, the Last Argument of Kings starter set. My order's finally come in, so I'm very excited to get this box open and look at the contents. Now on opening up the box, at the top here we've got the rules of engagement, some red dice, some cards, and a big mountain of plastic, and these bad boys are looking pretty chunky. So anyway, let's tip out all this plastic and see what we've got. Now at the bottom of the box we've got a whole load of bases. This is a abomination base, I believe, with the movement tray, so that's what's at the bottom. But let's have a look at all the sprues. Now at the very top of the box we've got one half of cavalry sprue, which is a complete knight. Then we've got two halves here, so that's our three knights. We've then got some brutes here, and I'm spotting two legs, I want to say. Three legs. Right, so that's our brutes. Then we've got our objective markers, our ferromancer and our leader, the noble knight. This looks like the abomination sprue, and that's the rest of it. Then here we've got some men-at-arms, another sprue of men-at-arms, and this looks like force-grown drones, more force-grown drones, another force-grown drones. Guess what this is? Yes, force-grown drones. And then right at the bottom here we look like we've got our mercenary crossbowmen. Now just to give you an idea of the scale, I've got a D&D Lich figure here. So he's standing on a rock, and he's about the same size standing on his rock as the mercenary crossbowman. To give you an idea as well, I've got this Horde's Mauler figure, and yeah, he's a bit bigger than those boys, but I think the brute drones might give him a run for his money. And then I've got a classic GW ogre, and he's quite a big figure. And yeah, they pretty much seem to be rivaling the size of that. And then let's get a little tiddler. Let's get a Lord of the Rings dwarf, and he's more like a hobbit in size, isn't he? Yeah, look at that. Okay, so let's get some of these assembled and see what they look like. Cut out the mini from the sprue, and it seems fairly obvious how this goes together. So a little bit of cleaning up of some of the nubs here. So yeah, so that seems to click together quite nicely. Then obviously the body clicks in top here, and then the arms go on. Now, I haven't seen any assembly instructions. Now, my understanding is to save on paper and be good for the environment, but all the assembly instructions are actually available as downloads online. So I'll have a quick look at that, tidy up all the little nibbly bits. I think some of the injection points could be a little bit easier to get to with side snips, but yeah, not too bad. And then obviously a trusty blade, careful of your fingers with this. And yeah, then we'll get it glued. There you go, that's the first figure assembled, the ferromancer. He went together pretty easily. Some of the sprue injection points I wasn't too happy with, but actually where they're placed, the worst offenders, you actually glue bits over, so this sort of like face mask and potion bottles, they actually cover up the worst offending bits. He's still a little bit wet from the glue, so it's still drying off, but if I spin him round, there you go, you can see he's got lots of nice little chimneys to give off his fragrance to control the spire figures. And as you can see, he's pretty tall. He's taller than this Mauler figure here. He's definitely taller than my Lich, and also my GW figure on a 3D printed base there, so maybe he's a little bit taller than he should be. So yeah, that's looking pretty good. So that's one down and a gazillion to go. Here we are with our first unit assembled, the Brutes. Now this is the unit that really got me into the game. These look absolutely magnificent. And as you can see, compared to the Ferromancer, they're pretty chunky, they're big. If I really wanted to be keen, I could have probably have magnetised the wrists so you could move the weapons around. You could even potentially magnetise the heads. The arms and the torso to the legs is a ball socket, which is really good for posability. Little bit of a problem for assembly, but it's not a big deal. But yeah, there you go. So let's have a closer look if we can. So as you can see, I've got this sort of like shield mace weapon plus the big blade. Then this sword-like bit with the other shield weapon, and then the sort of blade fan with the sword on this third one. And I've gone for the sort of regular heads rather than the top knot head for my leader. So I could have gone with this head. And I've actually got another spare head, so you get 5 heads in total for these 3 guys. So decent amount of variability. I thought I might have had some extra front or back pieces, but no, you only get enough to assemble exactly what you need. Now that we've got our Brutes assembled, and I have glued them to the base, which might be a mistake when it comes to painting, it's time to move on to the sort of force-grown drone grunt units. Now I'm going to try and film cutting this out and doing a bit of cleanup, but we'll see how that goes, because it's pretty difficult, and often I'm going to be lifting my hand up and making the mini out of shot if I'm not careful. So we'll give that a go, and then probably we'll cut back to once I've assembled all the drones. To make things a bit easier, I've cut the sprue off, and I really recommend you get yourself some side cutters. And what you're trying to do, and this is going to be pretty tricky to do, is you want to get in nice and close, and if necessary leave a little bit of a nub on, and just do a little cut. I have to keep checking I've actually got this in shot. There you go. And right, so that's one set of legs. Now each sprue, is it 2 or 3? Yeah, each sprue seems to have 2 sets of legs on. So 2 half sprues, I guess, will create you a complete infantry base. So one of these bits, which is the same size as a single Brute. So there are instructions online. I haven't really looked at them, to be honest. I did check last night when I was assembling the Brutes. Now, when you cut things off, don't forget you might end up with these little sort of extra flash nubbin bits. So very carefully. Now I'm cutting towards me, which is a big no-no really. Don't do that. That was silly. There you go. And then just a little rub to tidy up, hopefully not scraping away any detail. And you might have a little teeny mould line, so you can just scrape very gently that away. You can also get files as well. I've got a file set somewhere. So if I really want to go crazy with these guys, then tidy that up. Now, this blade is pretty sharp, and I have slipped and cut myself before now, and that's not a fun experience, so watch out for that. Hopefully I'm managing to get things in camera and focus. It's a bit hard doing this, so congratulations to people like On the Tabletop, or Beasts of War as I like to refer to them as, because that's who I knew them as for years. Anyway, let's get a torso cut, and then don't want to drop that. Oh. There you go. Let's get this other torso cut out. Don't know, I find it weird focusing on the camera screen. It's actually my mobile phone. So yeah, obviously, if you want to fund me on Patreon, I can actually buy myself a digital SLR that does video. Anyway, that's another matter. Let's see. Let's get some arms cut out. So we've got to be a bit careful here. Now, there is an art to cutting things off sprues, because the spears are worrying me a bit. I've heard that some of the arrows on some of the other mini ranges are an absolute nightmare to cut off because they're very thin parts. So, as I say, my criticisms of these sprues is they're quite chunky injection points, and some of the placements did worry me a bit, but I haven't actually found it to be a real problem. So what you think when you first glance at a sprue versus when you actually come to assembling it can be very different. Let's see, we're going to need a head. Got to be very careful with this. You've got this very thin part here, so side cutters, particularly if they're sharp, make easy work of plastic, which is why I'm really not a fan of metal, because filing and cutting and pinning and super gluing metal is an absolute pain. Whereas plastic, it's just a joy to work with, although the glue is a bit stinky. And if you make a mistake, it basically melts the plastic together, so it's an absolute pig to fix after the fact. But because it's relatively soft, you can do it. Now this is a really nice chunky shield. Let's get in here. Come on. There you go. So that's enough of me cutting stuff off. Have I got enough bits? So I've got a head, got a body, I've got legs, I've got a right arm and a left arm, I've got another right arm. So we're going to need a spear. So let's cut off a spear and then we'll be done. So again, as I say, it's an art. So you have to decide, and I would support the spear to make sure it doesn't bend and crack and everything. And there you go, done. So I think we will now try and glue bits together. I'm going to try and do a bit more knife work just to clean up these bits, but I'm going to do that off camera because, well, I don't want to cut myself for a start. Here we are with my cleaned up pieces, and so I've got a head and the arms and everything. Now the big debate I've got is, do I assemble it with the shield and then paint around things, because the shield's going to be close to the body, or do I leave the shield off and then try and glue this on after I've sort of painted it? And I think when it comes to gluing, the arm, by the looks of it, goes in this sort of groove here. So if I left this bit here and this bit here unglued, or if I painted it and then scraped off the paint, then when I glued it, it would go together nicely. Something, let's see, can we balance it? Something like that. Yeah, it cleans up pretty well. Little bits here and there that you've got to do. Now you can get a cutting board, which I've got somewhere, but I've been like picking it up and just very gently just scraping my knife across to clean it up. Anyway, let's get this glued. So I got some nice plastic glue. There's various different glues. GW does do some nice glue, but I like these Revels. They're a bit cheaper. They tend to apply really nicely. And then when you glue your figure, obviously try not to put too much glue on. And what you've got to do is put it on, hold it for a bit, and then it will hold via tension, but then it will slowly start melting into itself. Anyway, there you go. So I've got that glued in. So I'm now pretty much committed to that pose, which is a bit tough if I've got it wrong. And the spear, similarly to the shield, glues onto the arm. So once the body's dried, I'll be sort of sticking this arm on here, sticking this spear onto the arm, and then once I've got all the pose sorted, this head will go on, and depending on how you want him posed on the base will depend on where the head actually looks at. Just watch out, this is a smallish piece, and if you drop it, it could be tricksy to find on the floor. One observation I do have about a lot of these minis is when you go to stand them up, you expect them just to stay put, but because they're leaning over, they can be a bit top heavy. So when I let go of this, as you can see, it falls over. So you will need to glue it onto a base. Now, if you want to paint this without gluing it onto a base, you're going to need a little bit of blue tack just to have it stand in. And then once you finish painting, obviously a little bit of plastic glue on the feet, and it will stick to your base nicely. I haven't actually glued my Ferromancer onto a base yet. And I probably won't, because he's got a nice big bit, and he actually does stand all by himself, which is nice. Now, these boys are not as chunky as, obviously, the Brutes, who are absolutely enormous. I mean, look at the size difference there. That is just redunculous. So these are real sort of like troll-sized chunky boys. These are more sort of human-sized, although bear in mind this is 38mm scale, so they're going to be bigger than GW stuff, although they're a bit more realistically proportioned, I think. So although they're taller, they're not necessarily, more girthy. Anyway, that glue has dried pretty well. I did notice there was a little bit of sprue here tidying up, so I was able to do that, and then I just pushed this back into place because I did nudge it slightly. And yeah, it's looking pretty good, and there's some nice detail in here which is going to come up nicely with a wash. And this is fantastic, obviously nice big protective shield. So yeah, we'll cut back to this when it's fully assembled. As you can see, now I actually glued the spear on, it's actually balanced the figures, so it's not quite assembled yet. I think I'm going to leave the shield off for painting. So it's going to be a question of, do I glue the head on after sort of like blue tacking the shield on, just so I get the pose how I want. The decisions. And here we are, a complete unit of Foursquare & Jones. This is half of the ones in the box sets. As you can see, I've got the shields separately. They all look very similar. I don't think there's any variety in those. You've only got a few head choices and arm choices, so there's not a huge amount of variability. I would have liked to have seen some command sprues, but for a starter box, it's perfectly adequate, and I believe the command sprues are in the expansion boxes. Now, with regard to the actual sprues, hold on, let's just snap these. There you go. You've got one sprue which has 2 pairs of legs, and then the second sprue which has 4 pairs of legs. Not a very good view there, apologies for that. So I've got 2 complete sets of sprues left, which will give me another unit like this. As you can see, I've not actually glued them on their bases, partly because that might make them easier to paint. Anyway, I think that will do for this video. What I'll do is I'll then, in the next video, I'll show the complete Spires build and possibly do something with the Abomination. And then the follow-on video will then be me looking, I guess, at the 100 Kingdoms. And so far I've been pretty impressed. They're fairly easy to snip off the sprues, they're fairly easy to clean, they're fairly easy to assemble. Could they be improved? Possibly, but if you're any way experienced with miniatures, these are going to be a doddle. If you're not so experienced, I think you're not going to find them too tricksy actually, but obviously some of the arms, the way they line up, the join's a little bit iffy for me. I think GW has the slight edge there. But these are looking really, really good. Let me just grab the Lich figure from the D&D line, just to give you a sense of scale. So, let's see, let's grab. They're still drying at the moment, they're not 100% set to the glue. So as you can see, there you go. They're a bit taller than this guy standing on a rock, so that should give you a sense of scale. If I can find my GW figures, obviously I will do a comparison with them. Anyway, there you go. I think that will do for now, so until the next video, happy gaming.